smooth sailing so far.
So both of you guys are acclaimed musicians, artists in every respect, and you've been doing, various forms of film for a while. Usually there's an impetus to kind of traversing into another medium like feature films. And the thing that I love about the movie is that kind of like in a way like Go or Low Life, like it got touted to me as an anthology, but it really isn't because it's just so interweaving. So like, were these stories that you had like in your heads at first and then found a way to weave them together?
It was a little bit of reverse engineering. So the first thing we shot was the first part with John Ennis, the acting teacher, who's amazing and like spitting all over everybody. And ironically, when we shot that, it was about a week before COVID became a thing. So now everybody watches that like, oh my God, COVID nightmare. But so we created that one as a short, and then it was just like, oh, there's like more weird art stories to be told, you know what I mean? So, but then COVID happened, and which I was kind of psyched. I wasn't psyched about the pandemic. Hold on, I was psyched to not have
track that. Turn your cameras off now.
I was happy for a little while to do nothing, because music had stopped, and it was just kind of nice to sit around. But then we got incredibly bored and depressed, and so we decided to let's see if we can make movies, but with a really limited crew, and write these stories with one or two characters, and just keep everything really contained. And that's how the sort of snowball of Allegoria happened. And then it became really fun, like I said, to sort of reverse engineer, to try to, what if the screenwriter bought the painting and we just put it in the background?
The fact that you used the telephone call twice so you can hear both sides of it too.
Which was the crazy thing. So this one here, who has talent, did her whole scene of her doing the phone call on camera without hearing his. Like all in just imagining him, and it just edited together.
And and then you kind of retrofitted with lots of ums and uhs and stretch actor stretch. But then shot all of that and had to shoot that stuff later when you shot his side of the call.
Well, no, we shot him first.
Oh, okay.
So they did that call together. But then when we shot her scene, we wanted to use the exact audio from his call, but having no technological skills, we decided it'd be easier for her just to imagine him talking to her. So it was called acting.
Yes, I imagined his voice in my head for every single section, and if I timed it wrong, I would have fucked up the entire thing. So it was no pressure at all for that one.
One of the themes of the movie, from each piece of of the puzzle, it becomes a big puzzle by the end. Are all of these tortured artists. And there's so many of them out there tonight. We've all been through the creative process in one form or another. It almost felt like you guys were exercising creative demons, being in that garage or that small room with the band and being like, this could be the fucking greatest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, she says I am Marcus Muller, the painter, which I'm not that mean at all, but she says that's me.
You have had a lot of moments in the mirror with yourself?
Yeah. You're a fucking fraud. But, I think that it's funny. There's a fine line between art and being in the mob. And do you remember that scene in The Godfather 3, I think, when Al Pacino's like, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. And I often have those moments like, wouldn't it be easier just to work at Enterprise Rent-A-Car? And then I realized...
Considering how much they have to do when they walk around the car and be like, ding, ding, it's actually a pretty...
But then you realize you have no choice, right? As you know, we all know, anybody here that makes movies or music or paints or basket weaves, I don't know, there's you have to do it, you have no choice. And so, which is a blessing and a curse, and I just wanted to show more the curse than the blessing with all these people,
Especially since so many of us have gone through that creatively with the pandemic, where once everyone was told stay home, every screenwriter in Hollywood was just I get to stay home. Some people are forced, I'm gonna write the most amazing fucking screenplay of all time. Cut to now, and that person is still at home going I'm gonna do that still.
Yeah.
But it really kicked an ass to a lot of creative people to like look at Host, for example, a movie
Sure.
that was made purely because they were like, I'm stuck
Yeah.
here in this position. So when you were putting this together, like how much of it was, because like, you only shot one of them right before.
That's right, yeah.
And then everything kind of, so did you shoot during like, when it was kind of everything locked down?
Yeah, everything was. I mean, we waited a while. We shot the first one, and then we, like everybody, did nothing for a few months, and then we were just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we're going crazy. So we just started planning, and every other one was shot during, when you weren't supposed to be doing that, but, but the other sort of magical thing about the pandemic, which is magical and pandemic, was all the actors weren't, no one was working.
Yeah.
So all these people that would be maybe not available, like John Ennis and Bryce Johnson and Scout, and we were just doing nothing. So, we just called them up and, can you give me 8 hours? And everybody was available and everyone was dying to work. So we were fortunate enough to get really talented people that maybe wouldn't answer my phone call otherwise.
One of the things that I love about like both of your work is that you wear your influences gloriously on your sleeve, And I mean that in the nicest way. Like the thing that I love about how we can express our influences through the things that we make. And, I don't want to jump out and throw a couple of filmmakers your way that I thought when I watched it, especially there are certain frames in the way that you move the camera feels, very much indicative of a very old-fashioned way of filmmaking, like holding shots.
Yeah.
There's so many moments, especially in this, that like, very, if you look at like what Kubrick did with The Shining, where you're just holding on shots for an uncomfortable amount of time.
That was, you nailed it. You got it. So like Kubrick's probably my favorite director ever. So, but the great, my favorite part of the movie is that conversation that she has with her roommate in the doorway, right?
Even the okay from her, from like your side, when you hear it again, it's even more hilariously uncomfortable.
And that scene we talked about it a lot, like how do we, because it's one of those things you do, and it's either gonna, if it doesn't work, it's gonna not work. It's gonna be a failure. And we're talking about a bunch of different approaches, but one scene that what I pulled up on YouTube was from The Shining, and it's the scene with Jack Nicholson in the bathroom with Mr. Grady, where he's cleaning him. He drunk a drink on his, and it's this long, uncomfortable conversation.
You're expecting it to cut.
Yeah, and so we used that as sort of our guide to just like, and she just did one take, and everybody in the room was like, holy shit, that's amazing.
When you're also the editor, I'm sure you appreciate when the actor nails it in one, where it's like, oh, thank God.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I think that scene was crazy working with him on this because, everything else in this film we rehearsed a lot ahead of time because we had such a little amount of time on set. And he didn't want us to rehearse that scene because he didn't want it to feel rehearsed. And so he never really saw us do it. But he told us what he wanted, and we hadn't really done it together. And so all he did was say, I'm gonna shoot one version where I'm here and one version straight on. And so, it was 2 takes, and that was it. That was that whole entire scene, which was crazy, but it was weird because it made me hyper emotional for the character, and like all this, and there was all this like weird tension, and Josephine was crying by the end because she was so uncomfortable, and so it was
it's terrifying.
Thank you. Yeah, it was one of my favorite things I've ever done as an actor, just because it just sometimes there's those weird moments, and that was kind of one of them where it was like completely not rehearsed and just like in the moment, which was special.
You said you shot it twice?
Yeah.
So this is gonna get really nerdy, I'm sorry, but like because there's the one shot when you're looking right right into the camera, which is something that Jonathan Demme does or did a lot, like that was like one of his signature shots, but it's designed to make you either feel you are in the uncomfortable seat of someone who is confronting you in a way. But he's always said, like, for actors, I think it was in Philadelphia, both Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks had a really hard time doing that and emoting because it wasn't a person, it was a lens. Did you do that shot first or second?
Second.
So you were able to at least work with another actor, find those beats, and then kind of now go, okay. now I gotta look at this uncomfortable dot for a while.
It was weird though, because I think the character, she's like a shell. It's not really her. She's like in there deep in my mind, but she wasn't really her. So I felt like it almost helped because it was, you know, you're not communicating in a normal way with a normal person. So it kind of came out anyway, and it was a weird thing. I think Spider at first was like, I don't know if we should do it. And he's like, well, just do it, because he liked the first take so much. And then he's like, let's do another one. Let's just do this shot. And he was happy with that too, luckily. But it was just, yeah, it was a really weird disconnect that kind of worked for what we were doing and what we were going for. But yeah, it's definitely very weird editing yourself in that.
Yeah,
type of
it
situation.
was really important too, because the movie, because it is in segments, has so many different tones. Like, it's funny, and it's, you know, it can get light, and then, you know, with the one with Scout and Adam, it gets very sort of like you're just like in the fly on the wall on a date, you know. But I really wanted to, when we got to the end, have it feel like a very different tone, you know, like you just start to breathe a little different when you're watching it. You kind of got comfortable with all these sort of, I want to say, slightly lighter feeling stories, but when you get to the end, you're suddenly in a whole different place. Hopefully that worked out. I don't know.
Oh no.
So the opening, fuck this. Hi. So the opening shot, when you have John doing the meow, like, it felt very much like when P.T. Anderson shoots like reality. You know, he's always shooting people through mirrors, and you're feeling a lot of like the dirtiness of the people in the shot. And then you go right into that amazing monologue of him on stage. That was all shot first in one day?
Yeah, the whole thing took 6 days total, and in some days only being like 8-hour days.
That's insane.
So each of the first 4 were a day, like 8 to 10 hours, and then the second one was a 2-day shoot only because we had to change locations. But yeah, I mean, it was, it's, you know, and I just look at it and see the mistakes. I'm like, oh, if I just had a little more time. But I also kind of look, growing up, you know, as a punk rock kid, listening to music that wasn't always in tune and, you know, wasn't recorded in the best studios. I also like that. I like the camera bumps a little there. I like that the lighting's a little off. I think that's
human.
Yeah.
It feels like artistic. It feels like someone is splashing things on a wall, you know?
Yeah, I just think it helps. I mean, it's something that it's just like, you don't necessarily set out to make mistakes, but those mistakes can add to the character of the movie and make it feel more real. And I mean, I love all those little, like Jim Jarmusch films, and so they're just so like, they just look like someone got a Super 8 camera out, but you love the people in the movie, and hopefully the writing is strong enough and the characters are interesting that you don't worry about all that stuff. And honestly, I'm not that interested in making like big flashy movies. I like shooting people having a conversation on a couch.
But you're still gonna do Big Baby.
Yeah, Big Baby for sure.
I thought you were getting all artistic on some shit. I was like,
I mean,
come on, there's gotta be Big Baby.
Big Baby was a lot of fun to shoot. We ran out and we went and did that. That was like just the actors, me, and my son holding a tube light, you know. And did you do the Super Soaker? Yeah. So when Big Baby,
What?
we literally filmed Super Soaker with blood and just, on the Big Baby. But again, that was the point, was I was supposed to look bad, you know.
But it also felt like it was probably a weird thing that you had in your head for a very long time, a slasher that goes, yeah. That felt like someone had that deep in the recesses of their brains for a very long time. Like, finally I have an outlet for Big Baby.
It's possible, yeah, it's possible.
Do you guys think that, like, with your upbringing and, obviously, in your careers both in music and in film, how does one inform the other? Like, do you think that your rhythm of editing would be different if you didn't know the rhythm of where it takes to certain chords, certain percussion, stuff like that? Like, and the same thing with you, Spider. Like, how does that inform where you're taking like one medium and going to another?
I mean, yeah, definitely for me, even from music, a lot of my inspiration, songwriting-wise, has been from film and horror specifically. So yeah, a lot of just the choices I make as a musician come from feeling and just the films I grew up loving, and so they're all kind of intertwined. And so yeah, I think that if I didn't have such a strong passion for both of those things, I think I probably would have a very different approach. But yeah, I think that it's, for me, really important to do as much as you can on your own, or at least try to learn as much as you can. And you know, whether it's music, editing, you know, directing, writing, I just think just having a lot of knowledge, even if you don't do all of them professionally, but just trying to take the time to learn it.
Well, don't you guys think also that like wearing so many hats means that you can communicate exactly what
Yes.
you want? Like I that's how I started shooting and editing and doing music and stuff like that, or makeup, is just so that you go, just not that.
Yeah.
Which is the worst thing you can do as a filmmaker, when you can just be indecisive, especially on a 6-day shoot.
Yeah.
When you
We
need to
have
know
this
everything.
conversation all the time because, yeah, people are like, well, why don't you just get you know, we're about to shoot our next film, and they're like, why don't you just get a wardrobe person? I'm like, because we're too crazy. We're just like, can't. Because we want to do every little
Well, yeah,
detail
also,
that
like,
we possibly can.
You can hire a wardrobe person, but if you know that the character is going to be wearing a flannel shirt, there's this thing called Amazon, and you can order a flannel shirt. But yeah, you use the word communicate, and when you talk about music and in relation to film or TV or anything, it's really that's what it boils down to, is being able to communicate an idea. They're very different processes. Like making music or playing a show is a very immediate thing. Unless you're, you know, I guess in an orchestra or something, it involves much less people. But you just have to decide how to communicate to somebody. So, you know, I always, in music, maybe it was just a disclaimer for my own career, but I always use the phrase talent is overrated, which means that you don't have to be the best singer, you don't have to be the best guitar player, but if you can communicate with people, then you're going to be successful. Or, you know, and I think the same thing with film. You don't have to have, you know, all the money in the world and all the cameras and all the people, and, you know, if you can find a way to communicate and be realistic about what you're doing. I mean, if you have $2,000 or you have $500, don't try to make fucking Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like, make a movie because
You have to embrace the budget.
yeah, and you can achieve, like I said, you can film a conversation with two people on a couch, and it costs nothing, but it will look exactly like two people on a couch having a conversation.
Or when you hear David Fincher shoots like 99 takes of two people sitting there, you're going like, is that really worth all day?
Yeah.
Like, it's tough, but at the same time, necessity breeds invention, you know? What was one of the biggest on the set challenges that you had, knowing that you were going so fast? Like, when you got to set and went, this is exactly how I want it, and then it didn't quite work out, and how did you pivot?
I mean, there wasn't a ton of stuff like that, because a lot of also not having a ton of money and time is being prepared. So you try to be as prepared as possible, and you try to have a cast that is really talented, so they do the work for you. The biggest, I think I told you this story, but the biggest problem I ran into was, so it was the last day, I thought it was the last day of shooting, and we were filming that end scene, and Josephine, you know, they have their conversation, the door shuts, and Josephine walks down the hall, back towards the couch. I'm like, all right, cut everybody, that's a wrap, we got it, movie's in the can, let's go home. And I went home, and she's like, let me make you a drink, this is so amazing, you finished. And I'm like, about to sip a margarita, I was like, I forgot to film the last 20 seconds of the movie. She's like, fuck you, you're kidding. I'm like, no, I forgot to film. Because on my script, the end, you know, which was essentially, she goes back, sits on the couch, silently, the 6 notes rise from, she turns, looks, cut. It was like 3 sentences on the last page of my script that I'd neglected to turn, which is maybe why I should invest in a, you know, script supervisor. So that was terrifying. Got home, realized that we'd done all this work and didn't have the end of the movie, and so I instantly started calling and texting everybody and
As
pulled it.
margarita sits there.
Yeah, and everybody, luckily, the next night, the location was still available. We went back and in like an hour, knocked it out, and we're done.
Wait, was it the shot when she's on the couch and the
Yeah, literally, she sits on the couch and does this, looks up, turns, cut, we're done.
But I wanted to, funny enough that you bring that, because that shot is so, it's beautifully done, that slow creep in. Was it exactly how you shot it the night before? Or no, you
No, I didn't shoot it the
Did
night
you,
before.
like, so you didn't even, you had it all planned out, but then it was like,
Yeah.
oh, fuck, now.
Yeah, I just forgot to do it.
That's what happens when I go home early.
Yeah.
I finish my
Always have the editor on set going, dude, did you get it all? With all the coverage
I
there.
thought he was lying. I didn't believe him for like probably 30
Because
minutes.
there's no better feeling for a filmmaker when you get to wrap day. You are waiting the second that you can say, that's a wrap, everybody, because your butthole, loosens up a little bit, and you're just like, oh, thank God. For about 48 hours until you have to go into the edit room and then see how you
Oh,
fuck.
and that's even like you start cutting the movie and you're like, this is a piece of shit. It's the worst fucking thing anyone have ever made. Like nothing's working, nothing. And then all of a sudden, oh wait, that works. Hold on.
It slowly
Yeah, and
starts
then it
to
starts
come
to,
together.
and you're like, okay, it's passable. So it's, hopefully at the end you make something somebody will like. But yeah, at the beginning, man, the edit. I don't know if you find that the edit's brutal.
It is brutal. It's brutal because, in most cases, when you're ensconced in the production, you're in the trenches. You're in survival mode, and then you get back and you get to watch the assembly. And if there's any filmmakers out there, never give a filmmaker a razor anywhere near the time that they're going to watch an assembly cut, because it will go close to wrist. Because you think that it is the biggest piece of shit, and you've just ruined your career and your life and everything, and then slowly but surely, it starts to polish itself to the point where you go, I think we fucking have something here. And then 2 weeks later, when you watch it for the 20th time, you go, I think we've lost it, folks. We're fucked.
It goes through that every. I mean, I try not to watch it that much because you drive yourself crazy. Like tonight, I was happy to hear people laugh at some stuff. Cool, they laughed at that part.
Especially in post, you're in a bubble. In most cases, unless you bring people in or you get an opportunity where you can show it on a screen instead of bringing someone in and sitting, there, and you're watching them going, yeah, and then they're like, I have notes, and you're like, no, that's not what you were supposed to say. You were supposed to say I was a genius. Get the fuck out. But to be able to hear the crowd react to things, especially this being the first time,
Yeah, it's definitely a relief because there are parts that I think are funny that no one else does, but generally speaking, people reacted where they're supposed to react, I think. And I know it's a weird. I don't know if anyone had any expectations or whatever. It's kind of an odd little weird film. It's not because it's segments and you start to figure it out. I think when the first segment ends and the second one begins, you're kind of like, what am I watching? This doesn't make any sense. And then
that's actually, I wanted to ask you that because, when I read about it the first time it got announced, it was said to be an anthology. So I went into it thinking not that it was going to be a fucking crypt keeper or something like that, but when it comes to horror and anthology, the usual trope is to have a wraparound effect or have a host of some form, or just some way to kind of go in and out of stories in a kind of clever, macabre sort of way. Was that ever in the cards?
No, not for no. I did.
Good, thank God.
Yeah, another thing anthologies do a lot is they get different directors, different writers, so it has a very uneven feeling. So even though there was this separate sections, I wanted it to hopefully feel like one story, and hopefully everybody, maybe picked up on some of the strings that attached all the people. And then I think the fun part about it is figuring out how did all this bullshit start? Was it with that douchebag guitar player that had the 6 fucking notes? Did he start it all? And then, because story 5 is really story 1, and so just kind of, I guess your guess is as good as mine is, how this all started.
But that's the hardest part about doing a movie like this where you are in a bubble, sometimes in a pandemic bubble, where you got to make sure, did everyone realize that this was essentially a flashback by the time we get to the third act? It's a leap of faith.
And then you got to imagine that when Scout and Adam, Ivy, and John went on the date to see the Whistler, this has got to be maybe a year later than when he was writing the script, and what happened to him, was that all in his head? And one of the biggest influences for me in making this was actually Night Gallery, Rod Serling's Night Gallery, yeah. Because I just loved that as a kid. I loved Twilight Zone, but something about Night Gallery when I was a kid just fucked me.
Was it more gothic?
I think it was because it felt really adult in a weird. I don't know if that makes any sense when you're a kid and you watch
if
something.
you compare Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, they felt like they were highbrow teenage fare that made you feel like, it made you think a little bit, where Night Gallery made you feel. It was much more adult themed.
In that 70s sensibility always was my thing. Like for movies and, because I'm more of an 80s kid, but the films of the 70s was always the stuff that influenced me the most. But Night Gallery was just something that I started watching again during the pandemic, and I just love that. I don't know what it is about that show. It just has such a vibe to me, and I wanted. So with Allegoria, I wasn't setting out like to make the scariest movie. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to feel more like a Night Gallery episode where
there's a sense of dread in Night Gallery, and that's what that felt like here. And the longer that you hold shots, that's why everyone goes back to like Exorcist 3, where you have that amazing snap zoom, but that snap zoom wouldn't have been achieved if you didn't spend 3 minutes looking at something and going, all right, where am I looking in the frame? And there's moments in here where you are forced to have to look around, and sometimes you're rewarded when you have, what's the creep that you designed? What's the name of that guy?
Which one? The guy at the end?
In the gallery.
Oh, the paint monster guy.
Yes. Yeah, paint monster guy.
Yeah.
Just get ready to see the NECA creature paint monster guy very soon. But that moment that you have him behind and you don't use a sting, that is so far more disturbing. You're not going for the jump scare. You're going to trying to creep under people's skin.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do anyway. Yeah, because I think it's never easy to scare people because we've seen it all, but there are cheaper ways to get people to react, and I like maybe trying the hard way, just creating a tone and a vibe and instead of just like just someone jumping out of the dark all the time.
I guess we should probably open it up to some questions to the crowd.
Yeah, somebody ask a question, just any question. It doesn't have to be about the movie or.
So the effects in here, was that all done by you guys?
We had a couple makeup people that we used with this girl Gitzy and this girl Ashley Stansbury, who did all the makeup for us, but we would design it with them. A lot of times I would draw a picture of what I want it to look like.
The makeup was fantastic.
Oh, thanks. that was another thing, is not trying to do too much, not like crazy. I guess the paint monster is all, but you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, but not go nuts trying to create these hyper monsters and, keep the makeup more based on human form, you know what I mean? I think that, to me, that's always a little scarier than when I see these.
That guy reminded me of Tarman from Return of the Living Dead at one point.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm saying, Spider-Man remake of Return of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Who else?
Thank you.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who painted the painting and where is it now?
I painted the painting, which is that's an interesting. Thank you. It's I don't know where it is. Is it in the garage?
Yeah, it's in the garage.
It's so fucking big. I don't know where to put it. But here was the thing with that was I was like, do I paint two of these? Because the second version has Marcus with his throat cut. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so I had to paint Marcus first in there, shoot that end scene first, and then go, all right, everybody go to eat a sandwich. And I had to repaint it on set over it. So then we would shoot the beginning. But yeah, so that was my mess of a painting.
There's a joke in production when you walk on a set dripping, like when a production designer is just finishing something and you literally had a dripping set.
Yeah, for sure. It's the stuff that you have to figure out. It's my instinct is I would love to just shoot a movie from beginning to end, but you can't because you're stuff like that. Painting. Well, we can't shoot the painting until we have the other painting, and and so it's always this weird puzzle where you have to shoot things out of order, and not so much with this stuff because they're shorter scenes, but we're getting ready to do another movie and just figuring out how do we put the puzzle together where you're going to get the maximum amount of time spent, and but also create a vibe. You don't want to start on okay, day one, you're all going to die. You know what I mean? You want to create some momentum to get to that point.
You just mentioned your new film. We don't want to talk too much about that because obviously you're going into production, Mazel Tov. But what would be something that you learned from making this film that you're carrying over? Like a do's, a don'ts, you know, like sometimes people, a lot of times when they make a film, they usually learn what not to do the next time.
Yeah.
I mean, so
More coverage, yes.
yes, of course. No, our production company, One Fox, we actually did 3 films, features during the pandemic. So we had 3 chances to learn. Allegoria is actually our 3rd film. So it's Spider Spurs as a director, but he produced on the other 2, and I directed them. And so what we really learned, I think, is scheduling, kind of what going back to what he was just talking about, and just trying to maximize your time and also not having to go back in time with makeup. Actually, when I was on your guys' podcast, we talked about having 2 sets of wardrobe is a big one. That
People take
forget.
that for granted.
Yeah, so that's a big one. And trying to get a lot of the effects out of the way as early as you can because they end up taking the most amount of time. And, you know, you can, if the actors are prepared, you can get away with doing, you know, a dialogue scene a couple times, but, you know, the effects.
Usually it's one and done,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is the worst. Or the reset, like when you do like someone getting shot, a lot of, and that's the unfortunate thing about people now, like a lot of crews going like, aside from the safety thing, is like doing digital hits, is because you don't have to clean up. There's no three PAs like wiping a wall down and you lose 45 minutes on set. You're immediately going back to one. It still doesn't look great.
Yeah.
But it helps you make your day, which I would rather have that reset and get it right.
Absolutely, and I think if you hire really great actors that are really prepared, you can really count on them, especially we rehearse a lot ahead of time when we go into shoots knowing we have very little amount of time. So, yeah, the effects thing is a big one to get out of the way early.
Yeah, just making sure when you start, because you go in when you start, it's day 1, oh, we got time, man, you know.
You got this.
Like what, and then you're editing, why do we have 7 takes of this and 1 of, you know, so yeah, you have to just keep reminding yourself, just go, and be able to make decisions really quickly and balance out the theory that everything matters with sometimes it doesn't fucking matter. Let's go, you know.
It's about picking your battles,
Yeah.
especially when you're making something that you don't know if someone's going to be late. It rains outside. Anything that can get in the way that you can prepare every which way but loose, and then something happens, a car doesn't start that was supposed to just enter the frame, and you have 3 PAs pushing it from behind after 45 minutes of them all standing there going, I don't know what happened. It really does ruin, it can ruin your day.
You have to have a solid plan and then be incredibly flexible, because we don't, at this point, have the luxury of like, you know, building a house that fits exactly what it says in the script. Sometimes in the script it says she walks down the hall, passing 3 doorways, and then you're set, there's no fucking hallway here. So I guess she lives in the kitchen.
I was gonna say, then it's like, what do you guys feel about a bathroom? Bathroom works. No, wait, how much? 45 minutes? Bathroom's great. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it happens so many times, like in the 3rd one with the Whistler, you know, it wasn't a big change, but the original, he grabs Janice from the closet. Well, this loft had no closet, so it was, well, it's the bathroom, you know, and so it's always changing.
No one questioned it at all.
Yeah, you know, so you gotta be ready to, you can't, you know, that's not what it says on the page. You know, you have to be flexible and be able to move, and because all the locations we do are all real places. You know, we find weird houses and lofts like that where Marcus was painting. This is a real fucking place someone lives. There was a 25-foot real Christmas tree sitting, was there for like 4 years. You know, and like stuffed peacocks and weird, you know, and a pipe organ. Like, these are the things you find.
Instant production
Like,
value.
it would cost millions of dollars to, you know, put that together, but this guy lives there.
So the movie's coming out, it's doing more festivals and gonna hit Shudder.
There's no plan for any other festivals. Panic Fest,
Yes.
it's probably, you know, so we'll see. But the plan for the movie is August 2nd to be out on Shudder, which they were kind enough to agree to take it as a Shudder exclusive and distributed by RLJE, which will also go to VOD and all these places. So I only ask everybody in the room, and if you have any more questions, we have all the time in the world, but I ask everybody here as a favor to me, even if you didn't dig it, watch it on Shudder. You put it on. You can go do the dishes. I don't give a Just because this is what we do. Like, we watch so many movies, and most of them are smaller movies. Lots of stuff on Shudder. Lots of, because you have to support that stuff, because if you don't support it, it doesn't exist. And it's important that it exists, because I'm sure there are people in this room that make movies or want to make movies or have made movies, and if we support each other and watch movies and rent them and buy them, that means, the next great one will come at some point, and we'll all be a lot happier in life,
And we will someday get Big Baby.
Yeah, that's right. Big Baby will be on.
Shudder, if everyone does their part and watches the movie, when it comes out in August, we will have a Big Baby limited series spin-off on Shudder in no time.
I want to do a Big Baby versus the Whistler.
I will. Did you hear that crowd? They were like, yes, we want it now.
That's right. Enough with this artsy-fartsy shit. Let's do it.
Guys, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you
thanks,
guys
everybody.
for being here for the first screening. Also, karaoke at Helen's, I've been told, I'm getting text.
And don't forget to grab your posters. They're signed by us. Yay. But whatever, they are. And there's a cool wristband. So just, I don't want to bring that shit home in the
Highly
suitcase.
recommend-